Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here on this Tuesday. Hope you guys have had a good day. So far, so good my way. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video. You can share it with your friends or anybody you think that might like the content here. I appreciate you. And also 15% off all merchandise in the store using code Sherlock15. The link for the online store is in the description here underneath where it says all links. I just want to say a big hello to everybody who's new here. I've had a lot of inboxes, emails, people saying, I just found your channel, wanted to follow this case. So welcome aboard the crazy train. I'm your conductor, and I hope you'll stick around. We have a pretty full year coming up next year with some really big cases going to trial that I'll be covering, hopefully some in person. And if they're streaming, definitely here at home. Covering trials really is my passion. I do like doing deep dives on cases, but if I can cover a trial every day, I'm doing what I love. Music fact of the day, Let It Be by the Beatles was actually first released by Aretha Franklin 2 months before the Beatles version came out. The band gave her the song, but she took so long to record it, they just made their own version. It was also the last single before Paul McCartney announced he was breaking up the Beatles, leaving the band. He had some good solo hits, so I ain't mad. Day 8 of the Kaitlin Armstrong trial. I tell you, I think today might have been the strongest day for the state yet. We're going to start with Mr. Stephen Aston, the firearms and tool mark examiner, who was on the stand at the end of the day yesterday. He was back up for cross. Before we get into his testimony, let's have a little lesson in individual characteristics on cartridge casings. If you're on YouTube, I have a graphic up on the screen. On the left, we have extraction and ejection marks. This is just an example. This is not from this case, just a random picture that the National Institute of Justice has on their website. So what are individual characteristics on a cartridge? The extraction pin and ejector, that moves the casing and it leaves marks that are specific to a particular firearm. If you look on the left of this photo, it just really looks like the same picture with a red line down the middle and some color differences between the two. The same with the right with that firing pin impression. The firing pin impression is created when the nose of the pin strikes the primer of the cartridge casing and it leaves these individual markings. Let's dive into testimony with Mr. Aston. The defense asks if the marks that are seen on the cartridges are individual characteristics. The witness says yes. When asked if the marks could have been accidental in the manufacturing process, he said his opinion is that they're individual characteristics. The defense says if you don't know the process of how that specific gun was manufactured, how can you say the characteristics came from a specific gun when you don't know how the manufacturing process works? The defense then points to an article written by someone who's been in this field for 40 plus years, and it says that the opinion says the examiner should be familiar with the gun they're examining and also have a general understanding of the manufacturing process. He's asked if he had an independent person review his work. The witness said his work was reviewed by a coworker, and the colleague will do an independent second examination. They gather the evidence, go through the same steps. If the findings are the same, the report signed off on is submitted. The second examiner, by the way, agreed with his findings in this case. He also said he's never had a second examiner disagree with his conclusions. But what happens if a second examiner doesn't agree with the findings? A third party will be brought in. They will have the final word, and that disagreement between the first two would be included in that report. But that wasn't the case here. The defense asked if this is more like a peer collaboration than a peer review. The witness said it really would just depend on the conclusion that was reached. He's asked how he was able to eliminate the chance another gun had been used. He said the gun to murder Mo was the 9mm SIG, which is what Kaitlin owned. The defense says that yesterday the witness testified that Detective Spittler asked him to eliminate Colin's gun and then suggest maybe he was just given a goal to meet as opposed to him coming to his own conclusions. The witness said essentially that was a word salad yesterday. He was asked to examine both of the guns that Kaitlin and Colin owned. Ultimately, the results were that Colin's gun could be eliminated as the one that was used in Mo's murder. He just testified yesterday that to a reasonable degree of certainty with his expertise and his years on the job, that Kaitlin's gun was the firearm that fired the fatal shots that killed Mo compared to the test fire. The defense says that lead detective Spittler mischaracterized the work that he did in the probable cause affidavit. The witness says the line in there about that was incorrect. And the defense kind of says something to the effect of, we're just supposed to trust you on this. And the witness says, look, this is my job. I've been trained to do this, and I know what I'm looking for. That was it for his testimony. Up next was witness Dr. Bernadette DeRussi. She is the deputy medical examiner that performed the autopsy on Mo's body that was done on May 12th, so the day after she was killed. She explains the foundations of what they do in all cases. They remove organs and look for any evidence of disease or injury. We move on to Mo's autopsy. So trigger warning, if you're sensitive to this stuff, skip ahead a little bit. I heard from several people in there today that Mo's family came in late. They were not there for this testimony. They said Kaitlin did not look at these photos. She has been interested in other exhibits, especially the animation that showed her Jeep traveling from her home, circling Mo's block. But these, she didn't want anything to do with them. The medical examiner goes on to say that before any cleanup is done on the body, they photograph it as is. They photograph before they unzip the body bag. They photograph when they open it. And then they take a series of photographs to show the body pretty much how it looked at the crime scene. Once the body has been cleaned, in some cases, they have to shave hair to see entry and exit wounds. They did in Mo's case. They will do another round of photographs that show the wounds more clearly. I tried to do some graphics based on what I got in my text messages today. If you're not used to looking at autopsy diagrams, even though this dot is on the left side of the diagram showing the entrance wound, that wound was actually on the right side of her body. It's just kind of as if you're staring at someone who's right in front of you. To your left is actually going to be the right side of their face. Some people get a little confused with that, so I just like to make it a little clear when we're looking at these diagrams. This is not actually accurate, but I was sent sort of a rough drawing of where these wounds were located. So I kind of did the best I could. This is more just for you guys to follow along if you're watching on YouTube. Gunshot wound number 1 was to the right side of Mo's face. The entrance wound was on the right side of the face, and the exit wound was on the left side of her jaw. She had bruising around her left eye. There was hemorrhaging on the whites of the left eye. There was also bleeding of tissue and disruption of tissue. There was also bone fragments where the bullet had traveled. Gunshot wound number 2, I think maybe that this entry wound was a little bit lower now that I'm kind of looking at my notes. This one was to the right temporal scalp with an exit wound below the chin. She had hemorrhage under the scalp and the layers around the brain, bone fragments where the bullet traveled, and a lot of bruising on the bottom of her chin. This was inflicted with the shooter at a higher angle than Mo was. You wonder, was she maybe trying to duck behind something, and that's when this number 2 gunshot could have been the first? But ultimately, this second gunshot wound, from everything that I had in my notes, seemed definitely more fatal. She had hemorrhage under the scalp, in the layers around the brain, bone fragments where the bullet traveled. There was a lot of bruising on the bottom of the chin, and this was inflicted with the shooter at a higher angle than Mo was. That's kind of why I thought, is it possible that either Mo was trying to duck behind something to shield herself, or had shot number 1 come first, and at that point she's in distress and she's hurting, and maybe could have been in a kneeling position or something to that effect. I don't think we'll ever know. But with this coming from a higher angle, it just kind of tells me that maybe one of the two might have been how it went down. It's so terrifying to hear that video. I'm not going to post it. I don't want to put that out there, just out of respect for people that knew and loved her, or people that are sensitive to it. If you're curious, you can Google it. It's out there, but you can't unhear it. It is sheer terror. And then you hear those gunshots. Gunshot wound number 3 was on the left side of the chest that had a short exit wound to the back on the left side where it came out. And the reason that wound is short, or another word for irregular and not really symmetrical, is because it's believed that this came when Mo was lying on the bathroom floor on her back at the time the shot came. This is terrible. The bullet went through her rib. The sac around the heart went through her heart, hit one of the heart valves, a rib on the lower left side, the lower lobe of the left lung, and also the atrium of the heart. It's believed that came last. Number 4, I don't have a diagram for this. This was the 2 injuries to the index finger on the right hand. The medical examiner can't say if this was perhaps a defensive wound or where it entered or where it exited. Other injuries that Mo had, her left thigh had an abrasion and a bruise. On the right leg, there was an abrasion, and that was likely from the bullet grazing her skin. Cause of death, multiple gunshot wounds. Toxicology showed that she had a 0.04 blood alcohol level. That is very minimal. Nothing else was found. I believe she had a frozen hurricane at the bar when she and Colin were out earlier. They show several photos of the injury she sustained, the fragments also that were taken from her head. The prosecutor has the medical examiner show the bullet paths using kind of like a wooden dowel and his body. Things like that are very powerful for the jury because they really get a sense of how this went down. In the Alec Murdaugh trial, Dr. Kenneth Kinsey, who really brought that murder to life, and you hate to say that, but you really could visualize with him what happened in those seconds after the first shot to Paul, the first shot to Maggie. And he did the same thing. He used that long wooden dowel in the courtroom, and we were all stretching our necks because it was the first time we really could feel the gravity of those gunshot wounds and the pain that they both suffered. On cross, she tries to gauge the distance the shots were fired by looking for signs of stippling. Stippling is burns caused by gunpowder when a person is shot at close range. She will also look to see if the wound has abrasions at the entrance and to see if there's evidence of tissue searing. You know what searing is? You know what tissue is? Put the two together. She couldn't determine the distance any of these shots were fired at, but there was no stippling, so that usually means at least 2-3 feet away. Or clothing could have manipulated how the bullet entered the body. Could have changed that course of travel just a bit, but makes a big difference. She was finished with her testimony. After she was finished, I believe Mo's family came back in, and at one point they played the audio of the shots being fired with Mo screaming, and I had a couple of people there say that some family members were just plugging their ears. The next witness is Officer Rosalba Johnson. Y'all, this is the lady that we see on the video here chasing after Kaitlin Armstrong just last month when she made a run for it. She transported Kaitlin to her doctor's appointment that happened on October 11th. Kaitlin had a belly chain on her, and that joins with the handcuffs around her wrist. She was going to put shackles on, but Kaitlin had a note from her doctor that said, please do not shackle her. She sat beside Kaitlin on the ride to the orthopedic doctor. When the appointment was finished, the witness was in front of Kaitlin and opened the door to exit. Kaitlin was in between this officer and her partner. A nurse got their attention to hand them paperwork they had left behind, and then the next thing you know, her partner's yelling that Kaitlin is making a run for it. She ran after Kaitlin, but Kaitlin pulled her inner Forrest Gump and was gone. They show the video of her running to the jury and the witness poor thing falling up the embankment. A second video shows that Kaitlin, and I want to see this video so bad, y'all. There is a second video that shows Kaitlin did not clear the fence she was trying to jump. Somebody please leak that, but wait till after the trial. She turns around to run the other way, the direction she just came in, and then she notices Kaitlin has got her handcuffs off. They're not connected anymore. At this point, while Caitlin's trying to run away, they're just yelling at her to stop and telling her, stop making this worse on yourself. Kaitlin was apprehended a half-mile away. They show an overhead of the doctor's office as well as the route that she took her little jog on. She was caught ultimately in a driveway, and the witness said Kaitlin wasn't breathing heavy. She was calm, cool, collected, and she didn't say a word after she was caught. I'd at least given the officer a fist bump and said, good race. On cross, the witness said the fake injury she was being seen for was orthopedic. She did not want to elaborate due to HIPAA laws and privacy concerns, but the defense says the alleged shoulder injury was from Kaitlin being kicked by another inmate, and the witness said she didn't know of any abuse at the jail. On redirect, I love this prosecution team rocks because they get in some little zingers when they can. The state asks if the doctor gave Kaitlin permission to run from them. And she says no. She was off the stand. Next witness, Alejandra Gill. She does forensics on the DNA side of things. She took the samples from Colin, Kaitlin, and Cass to use as their known samples. Investigators instructed her on who to get DNA from. She goes on to explain how shedding DNA is left, this is kind of gross, but when we touch something, we leave skin cells. everywhere that contains our DNA. The amount of skin cells that are left behind when we touch things, it really just depends on how much our skin sheds. She didn't analyze the DNA herself. Intro the next witness, Samantha Perkins, DNA tech leader and supervisor. She gets technical, explaining how they extract it, amplify it, interpret it, all that jazz. There are two conclusions when comparing DNA. The sample came from a known suspect or the sample came from an unknown suspect. She said, ultimately, DNA is never 100%. Very strong support is pretty much the highest likelihood of it being from a particular person. So let's get into these results. The handlebars of Mo's bike. There were 3 contributors, one being Mo. There was also strong support that Kaitlin's DNA is on there, and then an unknown person. Colin and Cash were excluded as contributors. The bike seat, Mo, very strong for Kaitlin and an unknown person. Again, Cash and Colin were excluded. Then she swabbed the gun grip, the trigger, the safety, the magazine release. Kaitlin and Colin both are possible contributors, with Kaitlin being the greater contributor. Cash and Mo were excluded. The likelihood this is Kaitlin's DNA, I called it, y'all, 3.7 septillion times likely to be from Kaitlin than an unknown person. No DNA was found on the gun wrapper near Mo's body, and the blood on the floor in the residence was only Mo's. On cross, the defense says DNA doesn't indicate how DNA got to be in a certain spot. We only know it's there, and the witness agrees. They didn't take any DNA swabs from Colin's gun. The third unknown person on the gun was from a male, and there's no way to know who that was without a comparison sample. The defense talks about trace DNA as well as transfer DNA, and it goes back to the principle of what we leave depends on the rate we shed our skin cells. Then the defense talks about the transfer of DNA perhaps from a motorcycle helmet or the parts of the helmet. The witness says you would likely find DNA on the bike parts, and DNA could be in a place simply due to transfer DNA. The defense kind of runs with this, as we knew they would, and says it's possible our DNA could be somewhere we've never actually been due to transfer DNA. And the witness agrees. The defense also reiterates to the jury that the witness can never say that this is 100% Kaitlin's DNA on the bicycle, but come on, dude, I said it. They're going to say there's a chance. 3.7 septillion times likely this is Kaitlin Armstrong's DNA. I mean, I know the defense has a job to do, so I'm going to say what my math teacher told me every time I turned in homework. You tried. Moving on to the next witness, Pamela Mazak helped investigators analyze cell phone data and infotainment center information from Kaitlin's Jeep to show her location, but only for calls, not text messages. The information in the data includes the number the call originated from, the number it was placed to, the date of the call, the length of the call, and the time of the call. She also analyzed the data from Colin and Mo's phone. The witness had this presentation ready, and really it was meant to keep it simple for the jury. I've heard from people that were in there today say that this had everybody in that courtroom glued to it. And it was very damning because it really kind of brought a lot of this full circle for the jury, because apparently this presentation was done top notch. Very easy to follow. And that's what juries need. Something that's not convoluted, within what they can make sense of. And apparently this witness knocked it out of the park. October 28th of 2021. Now this is the time frame when Colin and Mo had that week-long little thing. 6:25 p.m. There's a text from Kaitlin to Colin. We've heard this before, but it kind of fits in better now. I know you know better than to show up to Meteor with that girl. Aside from that, enjoy your evening. At 6:27, Kaitlin texts Colin, "Where is the Dodge key? Did you take my helmet?" At 6:31, Kaitlin calls Colin. Doesn't look like he answered. At 6:31, she texts, "Please tell me you didn't take my helmet." 6:34. This is when, on October 28th at 6:34 p.m., this is when Kaitlin calls Mo. The call lasts for 1:28 seconds. I can't imagine what was said on that call. 6:41, Kaitlin called her sister. The duration of that call was between 22 to 23 minutes. 6:53 on the same day, Colin texts Kaitlin, "Can you please be an adult?" Later, he texts Kaitlin that Mo has already gone to Meteor with her friends. He did not go out of respect for Kaitlin. He said, "But I'm not feeling that same respect." And Kaitlin says, "Not the best feeling in the world, is it?" Colin says, "You are paying it back." Toxic. Why not just leave each other? Just walk away. If you know this is not going to work out, both of you, and you are not sure that this is the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with and you break up every other week, get out. Find somebody that makes you happy 24/7, not even 24/7, but find somebody that makes you happy most of the time. Ain't no such thing as being happy all the time with somebody. We all know that. But man, it just gets exhausting. Maybe it's just me being in my 40s and looking back and thinking, Lord, have mercy, figure it out. Do something, move on. Over an hour after Kaitlin called Mo, Colin texts Kaitlin, did you call Mo? WTF, can you talk? I want to understand what's going on. Kaitlin responds, she can't talk. May 9th, 2 days before the murder, Kaitlin looks up Mo's Strava account. May 10th, 1 day before the murder, Mo gets into Austin close to 5 p.m. and Caitlin's phone accesses Mo's Strava profile 4 different times. The day of the murder, May 11th, 2022, 9 a.m., Kaitlin and Colin's phones are both at home or at least close to it. Mo sends a text to Colin asking what he's thinking. Around the same time, Colin gets the text from Mo. Kaitlin and Colin leave their house to go on a bike ride together. At some point, Kaitlin turns around. Colin keeps going. Caitlin's Strava account confirms that she left. At 11:12 a.m., Colin is back home, and around the same time, Kaitlin leaves in her Jeep. Colin responds to Mo in a text. It says, I rolled out early with my buddy here from Asheville. Never heard from you. At 11:15, Mo says she texted him back and says, you didn't get it? Then she says maybe their phones are giving them trouble again. At 12:41, Mo sends a text to Colin that Cash has dinner plans for later, and she was just wondering if he had plans that evening. Or at 1:31, Mo's cell phone data and her Strava app both confirmed she went on that bike ride. At 3:15, Colin responds to Mo asking if she wants to go for a swim and to get a drink. Around 3:40-ish, Colin asks Mo what she thinks about that plan. At 3:47, Mo includes a selfie of her on her bike and says that sounds good, and she says she's dying from the heat there. He asks if she's still out riding, and she says yes. 3:55, Colin texts and asks Mo if she wants to take the motorcycle to the pool. 4:13, Kaitlin is back at home. 4:24, Colin and Kaitlin talk on the phone for just over 3 minutes. 4:31, Mo responds saying she just got back from her bike ride and taking the motorcycle sounds great. At 4:49, Colin asks if he should just go ahead to Cash's apartment, and Mo responds yes. She didn't have any more plans, and she gives him the address. 4:54, Kaitlin looks at Mo's profile on Strava. In the map section, that shows an activity start and end point, and it shows her location. 5:30, Cash leaves for dinner with her friends. 5:43, Colin texts Mo he's waiting outside and said the traffic was bad. 5:55, Mo locks the door to Cash's apartment. At 6:09, Colin and Mo are pulling into Deep Eddy's pool. Kaitlin, at this point, is still at home. At 6:24, Kaitlin calls Colin, but he doesn't answer. A minute later, Kaitlin sends Colin a text asking if he wanted to get supper and go over some paperwork. She says her appointment would be finished by 7:20. Colin doesn't answer that text. 6:33, Kaitlin leaves the house. 6:57, Mo and Colin arrive to that restaurant just across the street from the pool. 7 o'clock, Colin and Mo order their food and drinks. 7:15, Caitlin's on the road driving. And at 7:17, Kaitlin texts Colin, Finny, F-I-N-I, whatever that means. 7:20, Kaitlin is driving in or around downtown Austin. 7:30, Caitlin's phone turned off. She circles the area around Cash's apartment around this time. We know that from the infotainment center in the Jeep, not the phone. At 8:05, and over the course of just a few minutes, Caitlin's black Jeep is seen on cameras 3 times near Cash's apartment. That matches the data from the Jeep's infotainment center. So now you got cameras and the Jeep verifying her location. At 8:15, Mo and Colin leave the pool and head back to Cash's apartment. This next part makes the hair on my neck stand up. At 8:28, at this time, Mo and Colin's phone is within a few hundred feet from Caitlin's Jeep. I mean, she was right there. That's a close call, because what if Colin would have seen her? The other thing that I want to know your opinion on, and I put this out on Twitter, if Colin had went into Cash's apartment, do you think that Kaitlin would have went in and shot him too? Or do you think she would have ditched the plan altogether? At 8:35, Colin is moving again and is also seen on surveillance. So those times from his phone and the cameras confirm he's leaving. At 8:36, Colin texts Kaitlin he delivered the marijuana to a friend, asks if she wants to go get dinner. We know that that's a case of the diabetes there. At 8:36, Mo enters the code to unlock Cash's door. 8:37, Caitlin's Jeep is moving next to Cash's apartment in the alleyway. I have cold chills, y'all. So creepy. At 8:43, Colin texts Kaitlin asking if she's home, and then he arrives home at 8:50. Between 8:45 and 8:59, the infotainment center on that Jeep is off, so it seems like she turned the ignition off. At 9:07, Colin gets that phone call from a friend. Cell towers confirm he is at his residence. At 9:13, Mo texts that podcast host who, ironically, their last name is Strickland. At 9:15, just 2 minutes later, gunshots are heard on that surveillance video. 2 minutes later, 9:17, Kaitlin's Jeep is back on the road. 9:21, Colin texts Kaitlin and asks if she's eating, and he says he is going to set up bikes. 9:43 is when Kaitlin stops at the dumpsters in that apartment complex. At 9:47, Kaitlin's phone is back on, but it's not connected to the network. At 9:48, Kaitlin arrives at their home. At 9:54, Cash unlocks the door, finds Mo, makes the 911 call. At 9:55, Kaitlin's phone is back on the network. Not sure if she was in airplane mode or something like that. They never mentioned airplane mode, but as you know, if you hit airplane mode accidentally, you don't get out. On cross, the witness is asked if anything in the presentation showed that Kaitlin was driving the Jeep, and the witness says no. The defense asks if the witness can say for sure Kaitlin was using her phone that day, and the witness says can't say it was her. The defense points out that the data is a best estimate and not an accurate location for cell phones, but more of a general area. The defense questions the accuracy of the timestamps and then asks her if investigators come to her asking which direction they should go in. She says it does happen. In this case specifically, there was a lot of data. So what she did was kind of assisted with filtering what was probably the most important things they would want to focus on. The witness asked if anybody looked into what Kaitlin was doing the day of the murder, and she's like, don't know. The defense says there's no way to positively say that based on the data that the phone and the Jeep were moving at the same time. The witness is like, yeah, I can because of my experience doing this for a living. She didn't say it smart like that, but if that were me, I might have went there. She's asked why the PowerPoint she used didn't show any results from Mo's phone as well as Colin's iPad. She said she wasn't provided Colin's iPad or laptop to analyze, and there was no indication that any other device was accessing Colin's account. On redirects, the state says that they can agree somebody was driving that Jeep, and based on the pool burger receipts, surveillance videos, as well as Mo and Colin's cell phone data, that person was not Colin Strickland. The witness agrees. Can we agree that at 8:37, we see a black Jeep near Cash's address, and whoever was driving Kaitlin's Jeep was in the alley at the same time? Yes. Then the state brings it home and said, okay, somebody had Kaitlin's phone and Jeep together. They were traveling in tandem. The state says, can we agree somebody was driving that Jeep, and based on the pool burger receipts, the surveillance videos, as well as the data from Colin and Mo's phone, that person was not Colin Strickland? She says, I agree. 9:55, Kaitlin's car is back home. And the witness says yes. The next witness that I really cannot wait for is Kaitlin's sister. I want to know what she knows. So that's it for today. Appreciate you guys following along with me. Tomorrow, we'll pick up on day 9. We're chugging right along here. Justice for Mo, hopefully coming sooner than later. All right, guys, have a good rest of your evening. We'll see you soon.